since 2009, men have overall paid back a third, 35% of what they owe for student debt, but women have barely begun to pay back any principal at all. And so it turns out that men are much more reliable and faster in paying back their loans than women are. So when we talk about debt forgiveness, we really are talking about a narrow group of mostly women who have taken out a lot of money for advanced degrees. And this really is Biden's bread and butter constituency.
Welcome to the Debrief, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering this week and where the story's going next. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by commentary editor Conn Carroll. Conn, after being rebuffed by the Supreme Court, the Biden administration is reviving its efforts to forgive student loan debt, maybe in a narrower and more limited way, but they're still trying to get another bite at the apple. Talk a little bit about what's going on.
Sure. So I want to talk today less about the justification legally for what he's doing. It's a much smaller program this time, and I think there actually might be more statutory justification for it. He's not outright forgiving principal like he did the old time, but it's a much more modest plan. But I think it raises the question, why does he keep returning to this issue? Why does he keep trying to forgive the student debt when it's not super popular, especially when people understand that most of this debt is going to be relieved for mostly wealthy people? And the answer, which I was surprised to find out, was that when you look at who actually holds student debt, actually 2/3 of it is held by women, which I found very surprising.
And you raised the question of why should men be paying women's student loan debt?
Right. So looking into this a little further, I found out that most people already know that women actually outnumber men in college. There are more women in college, and they actually end up they graduate more. They have more degrees. But what I found surprising was that of those people that had graduated and were paying back their loans, since 2009, men have overall paid back a third, 35% of what they owe for student debt, but women have barely begun to pay back any principal at all. And so it turns out that men are much more reliable and faster in paying back their loans than women are. So when we talk about debt forgiveness, we really are talking about a narrow group of mostly women who have taken out a lot of money for advanced degrees. And this really is Biden's bread and butter constituency, is mostly single women who have advanced degrees, live alone, and this is why Biden keeps returning to this issue, because he wants to keep these voters happy.
So it's a sort of a get out the vote operation in a way.
That you and I are paying for, yes.
Right. That's awfully generous of us. So related to that, you've made the observation that clearly, women voters are generally regarded as a reliable Democratic voting bloc, and we talk often about the gender gap. But you've written about how it's really perhaps less of a gender gap than a marriage gap.
Yeah, so don't always want to talk about other publications, but I found it funny. Politico decided to do a masculinity issue where they had a bunch of articles on masculinity, but they were all written by women. Fine. You can have women writing about masculinity, that's fine. But when you have an entire issue devoted to masculinity and not a single male author, I think that's a little interesting. But the theme that they kept hitting on was that Republicans were the male masculine party and Democrats are the female feminine party. And that's actually not true.
And you used to always say Republicans are the daddy party and Democrats are the mommy party.
Right. Overall, on the surface, you look at the numbers, 55% of men vote Republican, 55% of women vote for Democrat. But when you go one level deeper and look at the marriage breakdown, you find that married men vote Republicans by a 20-point margin, but married women actually vote Republican by a substantial 14-point margin. It's only when you get to single women that Democrats win by 40 points.
Right.
So their entire margin among females is coming not from married women who actually vote for Republican, but from single women. And so this has huge implications when you then go look at the policy agenda of the Democratic Party. If you think back to 2012, during Obama's reelection, you had The Life of Julia, where you had this cartoon woman and she goes through her life, and at every point you have government programs coming in and providing and protecting for her.
Sure.
There's not a man or a husband in sight. And then Biden, when he was doing his Build Back Better agenda, the White House put out a very similar slideshow. This time the woman's name was Linda. And again, you have Linda going through her life, and every step of the way the Democrats are providing and protecting through government programs. No husband, no father, no anything. Men are just completely absent in this picture. And the reason why Democrats keep focusing their agenda on single women is because that is who's voting for them. That is who their party is.
So one area that tends to be very Democratic is large cities, and you've noted in a recent editorial that we're seeing a dearth of children in some of these large cities, maybe because demographically they're made up of Lindas and Julias. Talk a little bit about the implications of that.
No, they definitely are. I think when you look at the demographics of cities, you have a lot of young women coming in professionally to succeed there. And then separately, not necessarily because of that, you have very high home prices,
Right.
Which makes it harder for young families to start. There have been numerous studies done that show the higher the home prices are in a certain area, the lower the fertility rate is. Not just marriage, but the fertility rate overall is lower. And then you throw in crime and COVID, and in the past 2 years, you've just seen this exodus of families with young children out of cities, into the suburbs, out of blue states, into red states.
Thank you, Conn.
Absolutely.
You could read Conn and the rest of our commentary team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.